So I'm going to share my screen with you. Bear with me for a second. Right. So I think even though I spoke to you yesterday and mentioned that we may go through the industry analysis, I don't think we really have the time to do that. Just looking at the top 10 issues, there's quite a few. And when we talk about the relevant models as well, I could say there are certain models we may want to discuss a little bit more. Okay. So I would encourage you to participate in this discussion rather than me just narrating to you. Well, I think before we jump into the top 10 areas, there are four key competency frameworks. This is the area that CIMA is going to be testing you on. The technical skills, the business, leadership, and people skills, right? The leadership and people, you can see as a senior manager, you need to be managing and working with people. So therefore, the leadership and people skills are high in the agenda. Whereas the technical skills is only 1/4 of it, and then you need to apply the certain models into your answer, right? So the next one is about what do you mean by technical skills of business, people, and leadership areas, okay? And I'll be sharing these slides with you. I will email you as well as I'll put it up in our learning management system. Any questions so far? Right. Okay, let me go to the next one. So yesterday I emphasized, when we're looking at certain areas, how do we prioritize them? Okay. We prioritize by analyzing the space given to each issue, the degree of importance given by examiner, the strategic importance as well, and what would be interested to the directors and the board. And we'll also look at generally what issues have been tested previously. So for example, ethics is quite common, risks are quite common. These are things that they go on testing all the time, okay? So what are the areas that's in the top 10 issues? And when we looked at our paper, the case study yesterday, I think it was quite evident that these are some of the areas that they will be testing. So the case study is about a company that's in forestry management, and the other activities related to it. So obviously, sustainability plays a significant role there, right? Then we look at funding of a new projects. So this type of projects could be technology projects, this could be related to sustainability projects, and number of projects. So again, when we look at projects, I will discuss later on, there are certain aspects that you need to consider, whatever project that it may be. Right? So if you understand that concept, the technical model that I'll be giving, you can apply to any project that you're talking about. And again, we looked at unions. One of you quite correctly said, what if we go into new technologies, there's definitely going to be a union uprising, right? And how it will impact wood companies. So to give you an example of one of the companies that I worked in Australia, the unions in particular state was very strong, and this was in Victoria. They were that strong that at the times that they decide to walk out of the race, we will lose $1 million per day. This is a significant loss, and when there are X amount of days, and I think one particular year there were about 40, 50 days plus that these guys have walked out of the race. So you can imagine the loss that the company bore because of that. So it's just not only it is definitely impacting the bottom line of the company. Then of course this company is our wood company is full of risks. It's the kind of job that they do, the kind of activity that they do. There's a lot of risks involved, and as we discussed, it is quite a traditional industry. So they will be using manual labor, but that is there's significant amount of risks involved in that. And ethics is a question that has been asked. These questions on ethics, it has been there forever with CIMA, so it's not going to go anywhere, right? You may not get one complete question on ethics. You may, in your questions, you will have the opportunity to talk about the ethical issues, right? So this is where you bring out that senior management capabilities in you, and where even if you're talking about a particular project, funding project, you can bring in ethics into it, right? There are certain models that's there in ethics, so we can bring that into it quite well. Not only the model, but also applying it into that particular question, right? We discussed quite a bit on governance, particularly because of the composition of the board. We looked at the number of non-executive directors, the executive directors, the experiences they have in this forest management, as well as then we thought, it may be a good idea to have people like this with diverse backgrounds, but also they do not have sufficient experience to guide or steer the company. So what are the options that we've got? We discussed that. We said, why don't we look into partnering with universities or particular institutes in the world, something like what Emirates has done, where Emirates has partnered with Oxford University. And what another thing that Emirates has done is when it comes to technology, they do partner with Google. They do partner with Apple, because after all, Emirates is not a technology company but a airline. So therefore, if you are looking into enablement, you may partner with certain experts in the area. Okay. We also mentioned Forex as one of the key issues that may come in our examination, because our Forex, if you see, we've got in dollars, in Malan dollars. So they've specifically stated that they do have issues in this aspect. We will be trading in different currencies. However, one of the key things that came to our notice and attention was that they've not mentioned that they've got a full-fledged treasury department. Now, this is going to be a bit of a problem if they're going to expand. Not sure if it will come in as part of your unseen material, but treasury, the functions, is quite a key thing that needs to be considered here as well. New technology, we mentioned there is ample opportunity forward to look into new technology in order, this is in perspective of health, safety, environment, as well as if we look into even reducing the cost, right? New technology is something that we need to look into and then see how do we fund it as well. So in this new technology perspective, you might look at it in, well, going into new technology, then funding of it, as well as the change management component that comes into it, right? Now we looked at the industry quite briefly, but I will do an industry analysis maybe in the next session, maybe the first 15 minutes, I will talk about the industry analysis. The industry itself, they have experienced low earnings. They say quite clearly it's a cyclical thing, and the world economy impacts them. So therefore, this is another area, issues that you as a management accountant, a senior management accountant, will need to advise the board of directors as to, what options are available, how can we go about it, how can we stabilize our earnings. Then, of course, we talked about the projects, right? And any questions here?
That's fine.
Right. Okay. Now there are some models here that I'm using, and if you guys are not familiar with it, I urge you to memorize these models. Just draw it and name it 15 to 20 times, and you will remember. Right. So don't worry about it. We don't have 10, 15 models. We have very few. Right. And in this case, Mandela's Matrix, now I want to ask questions from you. Why have I put in this funding, sustainability, unions, ethics, new technology, and in the middle, Mandela's Matrix? What does it mean? Anyone?
Mm-hmm. Well, as for the things you have demarcated, who are the persons? Like for the funding, I mean the bankers. Bankers
Yes.
will be having unions will be having very high interest like that. You have put it in different things. Like bankers will have high power, but I think low interest. Not
right.
Like this.
Right. So what the reason why I have put in Mandela's Matrix is this model is something that we can quite well use for if you're talking about a funding issue, right? If you're talking about sustainability, if there is a question on unions, if there's a question on ethics, new technology, right? We can very easily use this model. Basically, it is, and even in previous examinations, they will not ask you straight away, what is Mandela's Matrix, of course, but you have the opportunity to talk about it. And then, again, be careful. You really do not need to go into explanation. I know there are some students here who are doing the CIMA exams for the first time. So I'm just letting you know, at this level, you are not required to provide definitions, draw diagrams, and so on and so forth. You need to talk about, okay, this stakeholder group, I think they are a key player. So taking Mandela's Matrix into consideration, you need to engage with them quite closely. Right, have a very good communication strategy, right? So you draw in that model and explain a little bit about it, but you really don't need to go into definitions and so on and so forth, right? Now, why do you think unions would be? I've brought in unions here. What is the reason here?
Because they collectively represent the workforce or the employees part,
Mm-hmm.
the stakeholders.
So again, when it comes to new technology, right? Going into new technology, unions will play a significant role here. So at that point, this model needs to be taken into consideration, correct? In ethical issues as well, if there is ethical issues, you need to consider, well, who are the people in this particular issue who's a key player, who've got, who we need to keep informed, So again, it is quite an important aspect. Now, even I can compare this with oil and gas, where when we had to talk about the gas aspect of it, and in Australia, the people were up in arms against, the company extracting gas from the ground, and they said, it's going to affect the water tables, etc., etc. So this company had a very good communication strategy, right? And because you were dealing with masses, right? And that's also this company, it's an impact in the environment. So you need to have a very good communication strategy. And what they did was they thought, well, we have to talk to masses. So what they did was, instead of the company CEO trying to talk to the masses, they engaged a soccer sports star, right? Somebody that is very well linked to the people, who is an ambassador, right? And then they gave him the knowledge of this company, the activities they did, and he became an ambassador for this particular company. And this company is also listed in the Australian Stock Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So again, branding was a huge issue, share prices was a huge issue. So we needed to manage the stakeholders in a very good way because it could jeopardize everything. Okay. Any questions here?
Here, I think one thing. Unions we can understand because unions represent the employees. They have very high interest in the company but low power. Okay. Yes. Now it's going through the ethics. Ethics means to the outsiders it will have a low power, low interest. Any persons outside the company, you have to be ethical to them. So basically they have low power and low interest. Now it goes to this funding. I understand funding maybe the bankers who have got very high power but low interest. And then the stakeholders, the shareholders, high power and high interest. But I've not understood this new technology from ethics through new technology to funding. This I've not understood.
Yeah. So sorry. Now the arrows going through, it doesn't. I'm not saying ethics is linked to new technology. So there is no linkages as such. I'm just having these issues revolving around the Mandela Matrix. Right?
Okay.
So it's not to say that ethics is leading into new technology. Right?
Okay.
Sorry, ideally the union should be high power, high interest, correct? Or is it different?
It will vary on the power of the union, right? So in certain countries, the unions are pretty strong. And maybe not certain countries, it depends on the union, right? And if it is not stated how powerful it is, another thing with the CIMA exams is if it is not clearly stated, right, it's not specific, what you can do is make an assumption, but please state it, right? You have to put it in writing. I assume that this is what is happening, right? In the absence of it not being there in the pre-seen or unseen. Okay? So it is very important.
So it depends on which, is the union strong or not strong? Yeah.
Correct. If the union is pretty strong, then they have to be kept informed. They have to be, the way you manage it is going to be very, very different to that of a union that is, not that strong at all. That means there's fragmentation, they're not clear in what they want. So it's easy for the company to kind of give directions and say, okay, this is the way that we are going to go.
Okay.
Anju, hello.
Yes.
This is Deep. Anju, I'm still not very clear about this new technology. I mean, like, how is it actually forming part of this matrix?
Right. Okay. Anybody else who wants to give an answer to Deep? Or I'll give one, couple of seconds for anybody to jump in, and then I will give my answer.
New technology will be closely related to the people issues. People are high interest, low power group, and communication is important when it relates to people.
So we came up with an example yesterday, in fact. So what we said was, there are guys who go out to the woods and go out to the forest and then chop the trees, like individual trees, if you want to take them out, right? And that is quite a risk for the company, for the individuals. And this is the way they have been doing it for a long years, right? And we said, what about looking at this? Why won't we have new technologies included in this? For example, get a robot, introduce robots. So immediately there was another student who jumped in and said, well, there's going to be a lot of, problems with the unions, right? Because as soon as you bring in robots, what's going to happen to the people? Right? Fair question. Right? So you bringing in a new technology, that's going to impact the people and their jobs the way they have been doing it currently. However, you can come up with a different way of doing things, right? Why won't we use these people? Because we need these people really to work with the IT companies, the experts, to build these robots, right? We'll get these people then to become ambassadors, even to going into other countries if this company, what company is going into consultancy, which it may very well go into, right? Because they want to be the world leader in this particular area. So in that context, for new technology, I need to understand, if I'm bringing in new technology, I need to understand who are the key players in this, who I have to have regular conversations with, right? This is part of change management, actually, because if you're bringing new technology, or if you're talking about organization restructure, right, of this model, Mandela Matrix, and then immediately form your plan on how you're going to be doing your change management activities. Deep, is that clear?
I think it is clear. I think for me it was important. I think it includes also drones, because I have seen some videos. The drones are actually helping identify some areas, and also some robots, as you mentioned, which is like taking care of actually cutting the trees, felling the trees, to use that one. Yeah, that's clear. Thanks.
Yes, that's exactly right. So we also, yesterday we mentioned about, exactly these cameras, using drones, how can you use this, and instead of people traveling or using airplanes to go through, and detect certain things in the forest, because they've got huge acres of forestry. So exactly that, yes. All right. So let's go into the next one. Then we spoke about, this foreign exchange is going to create a lot of problems for us, right? So then we need to think of all different types of things that we need to do to manage this fluctuation in currencies. Okay? Now, one of the things I'm thinking about is, does Wood have a sophisticated treasury department? Because we can come up, another thing, guys, you've got to be very careful, is you can come up with different sophisticated strategies, right? But is it feasible? Can they do it, right? Because immediately, if you are if you kind of suggest, yes, we can go in for a hedging strategy, futures, options, and things like that, and you've not said anything about the Treasury Department, and there is nothing that they've said in the unseen area about the Treasury Department, the examiner is going to be thinking, well, you're just churning out a standard answer, right? So you have to be really careful when you suggest your answers as well. Even though it may be a correct answer in theory, it is not applicable in this case, right? Now, I have also stated will vary on the country you operate, as in would operates, right? Let's say, if they're going beyond Marland and going into other countries, the strategies they adopt, it will vary, right? You can't have the same strategies in every country, right? Another aspect that needs to be considered is what would be the long-term strategy to manage Forex? Does it mean that doing things in a completely different way? If you're saying we're going to take wood from a particular area in Europe, and if you're saying there is a lot of it is going to, let's say, to South Asia, let's say it's going to China, instead of doing all the labor work in this European country, they may decide to send everything to China and get everything done there because to reduce the cost, right? And the whole business process, they may have to rethink. Okay? Is there any questions here?
Well, these are they can export also. It's export-oriented business. So in export-oriented business, through forwards or hedging, a lot of money can be saved. Now, in this regard, since nothing is mentioned, if we say, suppose that since nothing is mentioned, that they don't have a proper Treasury Department, like what you suggested is that since the cost is less in Asian countries and the expertise is there, this has been subcontracted to the Asian countries as business process outsourcing, and they are doing it. So this model can be utilized. Will it be okay in the exam?
That's fine, but no, I mean the thing is, you can clearly state, why. In the sense, the question that you ask is it okay to do that activity, or is it that we're doing it in order to manage Forex? What is the question?
To manage Forex, if the question says that there is sufficient foreign exchange income or exports are there, it makes sense that there is Forex management is that all this hedging is done. Now, nothing is mentioned in the pre-scene that there is a treasury, something is there, and some of the directors, the executive and others are experienced in this matter. So if we, assume that this and write it that that wood can and subcontracted it this business process out for any other Asian country like India or Vietnam or something, Philippines or China, and it will be done there. It will save a lot of cost.
Yes.
So this assumption is too much. You should not give so much assumptions in this sort of exams, or stick to what the unseen the pre-scene is given.
So I'm saying this is a long-term strategy. Okay. Now it's not. Yes, I'm going to do it next year and then forget about it the other year. If we are consistently saying, and let's say if we are having, I don't know what will come in your unseen, right? So what I'm saying is, whatever it may be, if you are going to get a contract, let's say, of 10, 15 years with a client who is in Asia, right? What would be the best way of working that out? Okay? So that, it's a long-term strategy that you're talking about. And another aspect that you may need to consider is, if you, let's say, you don't have a very sophisticated Treasury Department, another thing that you may work is you can work or partner with a bank, bank has all the expertise, right? And the banks do have, it may cost a little bit more, but since you do not have the expertise, and I'm again, because it's not mentioned anything anywhere in your free I'm giving this as an option to say, well, why don't we partner with experts, right? Any bankers here?
Yes.
Right. So what are your views on that?
I agree with you that there will be a cost factor to it, but then if they don't have in-house expertise, then they can probably outsource this or take the help of the bank.
Yes.
Banks will provide them with the necessary instruments, depending on which currency, which country, which period, and the direction of the home country the exchange rate. Right. Since what suggested is perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other controversial thinking? It is good for us to debate about this, because this will come for sure in your exam.
What is the meaning of invoice in home country?
Right. Invoice in home country is, let's say I'm invoicing in dollars and I'm expecting you, wherever you are, to pay in my currency. Okay? So if you are quite a strong supplier, you can command that. Right? You can say, yeah, well, I want you to pay me in my currency, because if you pay in your currency, you're gonna face a problem. And what you may also do is include this in the contract, because when you're doing your contract, if you are anticipating any fluctuations, you will always state this is the way that we will manage the foreign exchange. Either you will pay me in my currency, or we agree at a certain rate for a period of time.
If you invoice in home currency, there is no question of any foreign exchange loss. So there is no question of any treasury department, because if you can force all your suppliers to invoice in your home currency and they pay in your home currency, the foreign exchange fluctuations are being borne by the client itself. So there is no question. And in this case, if you can expect that your clients that you can invoice in your home currency and they pay in your home currency, there is no question, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically moving it to the customers.
Correct. So second, guys.
If it's only not in the invoice in the home currency, the question of this forwards and hedgings are coming. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, fine.
Okay. Now, let's go to the next one, the funding method. Okay. You will get a lot of opportunities to talk about the funding method, right? And there are different ways of funding as well. Now, there are standard ways of funding, which is dividend signaling, debt, equity, release of non-current assets. These are very, very common ways. But another way that we could talk about is public-private partnership. Now, taking into consideration, this is a company that is owned by the government, right? That's what they're saying. It's part of it's government, even though they're in the stock exchange. It is kind of supported by the government heavily. So we're looking at, what about public-private partnerships? What about crowdsourcing? Why don't we think of those angles as well? It's going to be quite a large amount of funding, but then we have to look at what is the best way of doing it at the best possible cost, and involving the public here, right? Now, crowdsourcing and PPP, you're involving the public, you're involving the others into our activities, because this type of funding is definitely going to impact the society. So therefore, we want to not only create our brand value, increase our brand value, but also create awareness. Any questions here?
No, sorry.
What about venture capital here?
Right.
Another person, can you answer why venture capital? What about venture capital?
No, well, venture capital in this side of industry, because timber industry is a very traditional form of industry. In here, venture capitalists, I don't think so that too much scope is there. It comes into now in ITs and others, all these things have come in, like a lot of websites have come in to do short business and others, commerce and others. But timber industry, the traditional industry. You generally don't go through the e-commerce to buy your energy requirements, generally.
My view is venture capital is more important because it's a cyclic business. A venture capitalist waits long time to get the return.
Right.
But in the same sense that
capital
in this story, because it's a very capital intensive, here like this company is supported by the government, and others like you get that you can first have the royalty of a forest area, and then it takes a lot of fund. Unless it is a very established company, for a new companies to enter in this sort of market is not very easy. That's my opinion.
And why generally for venture capital, at what stage does a venture capital come in?
In the initial stage of the business.
Exactly. So we are not at that stage, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And M&M theory on dividends. So what is M&M? Not the M&M chocolate.
It's the body cleaning and Miller theory. It's well, the same thing. Here we can say that
Their theory on dividends.
Yeah, it's a dividend. The investment and dividend theory and the weighted average cost of capital. So here the debt is cheaper than equity. All these things come in. The same thing.
What they said was the stakeholders are indifferent to the company giving dividends, right?
Yes.
They're indifferent, but we know in reality it's not the case, correct?
It's not like it, because here the value of the firm depends on the dividend the firm gives. I don't think so here such a case is there.
Yeah, so this is where, again, you can quite nicely bring in that theory in, just state it, and move on to your answer. You can just make the M&M theory stated like blah blah blah, right? However, it does not apply in the real life, right? Dividends does play a significant role in the company, and if they suddenly stop dividends or reduce significantly, it sends out a message to the shareholders and the stakeholders saying, well, we are in a bit of a problem, right? And then we also have to talk about debt equity advantages, disadvantages. Again, take into consideration the taxation, right?
Yes.
If you're in M country, that's one thing. But let's say you're doing a project in a different country, right? You need to consider the taxation of that country as well.
Yes.
Always look at that particular country you're doing the project. Are you in a position to get tax advantages? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Since the amount of investment required is expected to be high, is crowdsourcing a suitable option?
Any other? Well, I'll leave it to others to answer. What do you think?
crowdsource, I don't think so. I mean, in this type of industry, the crowdsource is a substantial investment thing. I mean, crowdsource will not help anything.
It depends what type of crowdsourcing you're talking about, isn't it? It could be various different ways of doing crowdsourcing, right? So it may be, well, these guys, they want forest land, X amount of forest land, right? And there are certain individuals who own this forest land. And instead of giving funding, they could lease this forest to this company for X amount of years. That's a possibility. So don't think of just about money, right? Them giving money.
Yeah, but I've never heard of some persons owning some forest land in the country, really.
It is if you see the world, that is called forest ownership, most of the forests are owned by individuals compared to the companies. Only very few percentage of companies are owned. Most of the forests are owned by individuals and families.
Suppose in India, anybody can buy forest land. These are under the government itself. I don't think so. When the government gives it and sells it, there a question comes. I don't know about 2 other foreign countries. India, I never heard of some forest land where some reserve forest is there. It is owned by some individual.
No. In the Europe, mostly owned by families and the individuals. If you see the
rubber plantations and all owned by individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly. Very few the companies own.
So that will be a very good opportunity where you can talk. You have to talk about something. Funding in a different way. This is where people like the companies like Uber, Airbnb really took things to a different level because they broke away from the norm, and they went to talk about. They went on to build companies with individuals' assets. Like, for example, Airbnb is the biggest hotel company in the world. But they don't own any real estate. Okay? And so is Uber. Yeah? Any other questions? Very good questions, guys. Very good participation because I understand for certain students, you don't know whether it makes sense. So it's good to ask those questions and clarify. Any others? Let's go to the next one. Right. This is typically, if you're looking at risks, you need to figure out, is it strategic risk, operational risk, financial and hazardous risks, right? The reason why we do it is because we treat them very differently. Yeah? And we need to come up with a risk response for each of these risks. And also, the way we manage the risk depends on the company's risk appetite, the attitude, and the capacity as well. And we talk about an enterprise risk management strategy. So we as a company, we understand we are in wood company. We know there is a number of risks for this particular company. So we really need to consider, how do we manage these enterprise risks? Okay. Any questions here? Because I'm gonna go into the next one quite quickly. So this is about the risk drivers. This is really good, good diagram, which kind of gives you, the structure to how to identify the risks, right? And the drivers and how to manage them, right? We will not go into detail because we will not have time. But again, you see financial risk. We talk about interest rates, foreign exchange, credit risks, right? All of them are there in our company. Strategic risks. We talk about competition, customer changes, industry changes. The demands of the customers may change as well, right? So that's another thing that we have to think about. Operational risk related to regulations, culture, board composition. We know we have a lot to talk about our board composition. Okay, so I'm going to the next one quite quickly. Do you have any questions here?
Will you be sharing these slides?
Yes, of course. Yes, I am going to be sharing.
Thanks.
Then I thought it is good to give you this perspective as well, because, well, it's well and good to talk about the financial risk, strategic risk, and operational risk and hazardous risk, but how are we going to assess these things, right? How are we going to go about it? Because this is where they will ask you to kind of basically identify the risks and also assessing them. How are we going to go about it, right? Those are the key things that will be there in your exam. So you need to think of what are some of the key risks that will be there. So if I ask you, what are some of the top 3 risks that you can think of in this case?
Regarding what? Operational risk or what? I mean,
any risk for this particular company, what would you, let's go to this one, what would you think be one of the key risks?
Natural disasters,
I mean, that's something, act of God, basically, and how do you manage it?
Already have foreign exchange risk, no?
Sorry?
Foreign exchange risk, we already have.
Yeah.
Regulations could change.
Yeah. We talk about, let's talk about one activity, right? One thing in consideration. Let's talk about fire. I mean, for example, bushfires, fires in forest are very common. Flies or something, and things like that. How can you manage that? I mean, you cannot manage it. Well, what you can do, make sure that you do mitigation activities. For fire, what are the activities that you would do? There'll be a lot of monitoring devices. Again, we may use a lot of technology to manage this. So may go into insurance.
Insurance, exactly.
Fire breaks. Fire breaks.
Yes. We may also get expertise from other countries, right, who have regular experiences with such fires. We ask them, what do they do? We may have expertise in that side as well. One activity I just took out, say, you look at something specifically like fire, about it.
Also, does it cover under insurance?
It may or it may not. Now, when we had in Brisbane, the floods, it's not covered. Were insured. They said the floods is not covered, and they said, act of God, it's not covered. So a lot of people, a particular insurance provider stated this. A lot of people lost because of that. So you've got to be very careful when it comes to the insurance as well.
Anju? Hello?
Yeah.
Is fire can be considered as act of God?
Any other thing? Because no, not necessarily, because it can be deliberate as well as it just happens. There's lightning and the fire just started. But there could be an event where somebody cigarette butt is there, it lights the whole fire. This has happened in Australia many a time. Okay? So shall we go to the next one? So this is a CARA model, how we manage and deal with risk. Okay? Do you accept it? Do you transfer it? How do you reduce and avoid? So again, I will not go into detail into this, but this is a model that you can use as well.
What did you call this model?
CARA. So T-A-R-A. CARA.
All right.
Okay. So I think we don't have to go through this aspect. We've gone through it enough. Let's jump into impact of staff and issues, right? So if
You cannot hear. I think there's a lot of echo happening.
hold on for a second.
Same here also.
Can you hear now?
Yep. Yeah, perfect.
All right. Sorry. So this is Johnson and Scholes SAFS model. Is suitability, feasibility, acceptability, and sustainability. Now, the SAFS plus S model, this framework, is applicable to a lot of the things that we do. Any project that we go into, right? Any activity that we are planning, if it's a strategic option that we're evaluating, we will always use this model, okay? Whether it is technology, funding. So what is the SAFS plus S model? And particularly in this case, the sustainability plays a significant role, right? If you're talking about, is it suitable for our company? Is it feasible, right? Do we have the resources, the competencies? Even though we want to get into a high-tech technology event, a project that will drive a lot of benefits, we may not have the competencies, the skill set. So this is where we look into partnering with someone else, right? Acceptability, again, even though it's suitable, feasible, stakeholders may not accept it, right? So this is where, again, you need to consider the stakeholder analysis and to see, well, whether these stakeholders will accept it. And they may accept it or not accept due to various reasons. They might not be ready for it, right? So again, an example would be where, I'll give you a very simple example. Once Etisalat, they were going into Sudan to start business, telecom operations there. And one of the activities they were planning on doing was to implement an ERP system, Oracle system. And a lot of people in the team, they said, well, this is not a very good idea due to many factors. However, Etisalat, in their infinite wisdom, said, no, this is fine. We have the money. That's not a problem. We have the skill set. We have our people to do it. They'll come and do it. So we don't need any ground force to do anything like that. So it's not going to be a problem. But really understanding the people who eventually work with this system were not ready, right? And it was a project that didn't go very well because the stakeholders were not ready. The employees were not ready. Okay? So similarly, there would be different reasons where the stakeholders will not accept it. Right? So acceptability plays a significant role. So the other one is sustainability. If the chosen strategy meets all the above criteria, it is essential that the strategy also passes through the final test of sustainability. And what does that mean? Can anybody elaborate a bit more?
I mean, you have to, if you implement a new process or a system, you have to sustain it. You have to, it has to be an ongoing process. You cannot stop it abruptly. You have to have the proper resources to sustain that operation for a significant period of time. Right.
Any other views?
I think sustainability is at the center of the business model, and the impact on the social aspects of it, and balancing the economic results with other aspects, other stakeholders' interests are important for the company.
Correct. Right. So it is going beyond your ecosystem, basically, isn't it? It's not only just the company, you just go beyond it and say, is it sustainable? So we spoke about the governance yesterday, and we looked and we said, well, one of the key things is, one of the key questions that may come up is, critique the current structure of the board, right? We also, when we looked at the board, we said, well, they're not really quite experienced in this particular forestry area. We don't have sufficient NEDs, non-executive directors. And we also we saw chairman is quite involved in several committees. So the thing is, he's got too much power, which is not really good when it comes to the governance. Right? We need independence to come up with different issues. If different issues are brought up, we need independence where people are able to talk freely and bring out issues freely to the table, right? I have stated something here, refer to UK Combined Code, and I've also given the Combined Code here for you. Now, it gives you very clearly the type of committees that we should have, right? Even though I think we have a few committees, quite a few committees with this company, but what we're saying is, well, if this particular company is going to go and become the world leader, why don't we look at a full-fledged governance, right? And actually adapting this UK Combined Code, which says you have executive committee, investment committees, audit committees, nomination committee, and a remuneration committee. Now, how many committees do we have in this case with what?
4.
Audit, remuneration, nomination, and health and safety.
Right. So they have health and, but do they have an investment committee?
No.
Right. So this is something that you may want to recommend, right? Because they may want to go into they will certainly go into different investments. And investments, that's the time where we need a lot of governance. So definitely we can recommend, and the executive committee, you can look at that and say, is this something that we would want board to look at as well? Okay. Any questions here? Okay, let's go. We spoke about the industry. We said, well, it's very cyclical in nature. So what options are there to reduce this? That's your job. You're the creative one. You are the artist in this whole thing. You need to come up with a lot of creative ideas and say, well, these are some of the options that I'm talking to you about, and these are the recommendations, and please provide recommendations as well as conclusions if there is a report that they're asking. Okay, you can talk about ANSOS Matrix here to manage the above, right? We talk about new technology as well as PESTEL here, right? The reason why we talk ANSOS Matrix is we can talk about a lot of new products, new markets that these guys can go into and manage this cyclical nature, right? Technology, of course, can reduce the cost of the activities, because if they're only using European-based resources, which is quite expensive, we look at different ways of doing it as well. Right? We also need to look at the PESTEL, not only in our country M, but also if you're going into other countries as well. Okay. Any questions here?
Do we have to talk about the investment when we talk about the technology?
Sorry, new technology, yes. What about
do we have
investment?
to also talk about the investment involved in
yes,
the new technology?
Of course. So that's a good question, actually. When you're talking, if there's a question on technology or you bring in a new technology, always consider, guys, how am I going to fund this, right? How am I going to? So you have to give a round answer. Just don't give an answer that's where that structure comes into play, right? As soon as you talk about technology, there are few things that we have to think about, right? The funding, the stakeholders, the change management. What is this technology going to bring us? That's the first question that we should ask, right? Any project that you're doing, the first question is, why are we doing it? How is it linked to the strategic imperative? Or just because I like to do it, I'm doing it, right? Because there are pet projects as well. So, you need to, if we have that investment, this one, the investment committee, that's the reason why you may recommend an investment committee as well, to make sure that our investments, what we make, either in technology or anything else, is linked to our strategic imperatives. It's linked to our vision and mission, right? And because you always need to ask the question why. Okay? And unions, another issue. Well, what can happen? I just gave you an example of loss of revenue, bad publicity, low morale, motivation. That can really, all these things can really bring down the company, and actually you can even stop operations, right? So this is where we need to quite subtly bring in this Lewin's theory of change management. As you can see, unfreeze, change, and refreeze, whatever it is that you're doing, right? You're going into a new country, you will experience change. You're bringing in new technology, again, you will experience this change management. Okay. So unions are since they spoke about unions, this is another area that you need to consider and always bring in this Lewin's theory of change management. And as you can see, it's not very complex. None of the models that I have given you here are quite complex. But if you're not familiar with it, just draw it about 15, 20 times, and like I said, you'll memorize it. Ethics. Now, how to answer the question is given in the next slide. You need to memorize this CIMA ethical principles. There's no getting away from this, and it's worth memorizing because you can chuck it in any of your answers, right? Even though you have not got a full-fledged question on ethics, again, this is one of those things you can just land anywhere, and they will just love you for it because CIMA loves ethics. Okay, so you need to know how to score points as well. So this is an area that you need to know quite well. Memorize this part as well as what it means. Then we go into how to answer the question. Okay. What is the issue here? Right? That's what it is. Check all your facts, right? And then, is it ethical? Right? And is it legal? Which fundamental principles are affected? Right? So, of those 5, we ask our question, what fundamental principles are affected? Then you identify the affected parties. What is a possible course of action that you can take? You may also need to take professional or legal advice, right? And how would you manage this? Because you need to be very careful and you need to manage it so that you need to disassociate yourself from it, and you need to bring it to the attention of the authorities. Right? So disassociation means it's not just that you avoid it and just run away from it. You need to bring it to the authorities. Right? So it is quite important to talk about ethics, and you can apply this in your case study in many different areas, right? So any, guys, can you give me some examples where you can use this?
Yes, Anju, I don't know whether I can give you an example, but I have a question.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So, for example, the chairman asks you to do something, which through your CFO in this case, what actually appears that it is a little bit unethical. For example, there is a kind of a fire, and then just to do the damage control, you are just saying that okay, just meet the regulatory guys in private to ask them what is the issue. So, so practically speaking, I mean, like it's quite a challenge because the chairman of the company is actually asking you to do something which you believe is unethical. So the thing is that because I have seen actually in the past papers questions like this coming up. So your suggestion on how we should approach the answer?
Yeah, I'm going to go through this. Check all your facts. Fire has happened. Guys are coming to check to investigate, right? Or has done the investigation. Somebody has done the investigation, and you are supposed to go and meet them in private. That's what is asked, correct? It's ethical. Is it ethical or not? So you have a question. Is it legal? Right? Does it state somewhere in your code of conduct of the company, or in, for example, when it comes to even the country, right? So sometimes if it depends in the way investigations are handled, particular countries, or even in your particular company, because in your operations manual or your country, the way it's handled, they will say an investigation is carried out. The people, the employees cannot have discussions with the investigators. It has happened in Australia as well. Right? When there is an investigation going on, again, I'm referring back to my oil and gas experience, where there are fatalities. When they come in, the investigators come in, they carry out the investigation. It is independent. You are not allowed to go in, and you will not be entertained either. Right? So you can answer those questions in that manner. So you can quite clearly say, is it legal? That question you can answer by saying, well, if it is stated in your operating manual that you're not supposed to do this, it is illegal. And if the country's law in a situation like that states this is how you need to behave or operate, it's certainly illegal, right? So there's no two questions about it. And which fundamental principles are affected when we go to our fundamental principles? And what do you think? What do you think is affected?
Integrity.
Professional behavior, there can be more than one, that's fine. And say integrity can be professional because you've not behaved in a very professional manner, right? Because if you go ahead with it, this is what's going to, possible courses of action, internal and external, right? So what sort of action? If you go ahead with it, this is the course of action that will impact you as a person as well as the company, right? What possible course of action should you take? Maybe you should educate your chairman, right? Maybe he's not aware, right? You're not sure. Identify the affected parties. Of course, you can do that. going to seek professional or legal advice. Does it answer your question, Deep?
Yes, to a larger extent. And I think Neil who, actually gave a specific example that there is an accident on site and the supervisor intends to not report the same, as it would be bad publicity. So of course we know the answer, but sometimes it's a little bit challenging how to structure the answer. So I think I got your point that
you have to structure it exactly this way. Then it's easy to the correct answer, right? I think we know immediately, yes, it's not right. Okay? But how do you say it in a more professional manner to the examiner? It is not the right thing to do. And how do you score marks, most importantly?
Correct.
So that's where we have to clearly state, okay, these are our facts. We've looked at whether it's ethical or not, or if it's legal. We've identified the parties affected. We've looked at the possible courses of action, identified the principles affected, then we identify the parties, right? And then we look at professional advice, okay? So the structure of an ethical question becomes very important because, to be honest, it is quite easy to answer ethical questions or come to a conclusion saying, well, this is obviously it is not ethical. But I think, Deep, you hit the nail on the head. How do you structure? How do you answer it properly?
Do we have to also give an alternative option in those cases?
We can. So give an example.
Basically, what we are going to do is saying no to certain options. From a management perspective, they want to solve the problem. So just saying no probably will not help them completely. But then that's why we have to when we look at possible course of action, actually it will be possible courses of action, and then we have to state how it will impact. You have to look at how it will impact you if you go ahead with it, right? Because you can lose your CIMA credentials, and you as a person can lose. And how will it impact the company when it comes out? Right. So these alternatives will come in the possible course of action evaluation.
Correct.
Good, thanks.
So this is a very, very important area, and an area that you can apply to all questions that come through, right? And the biggest one is the sustainability. I think, they're definitely going to ask you something related to sustainability, or in all three questions, who knows. Then we talk about carbon credits. If you don't know what carbon credits are, you need to go in and Google this, because you can trade carbon credits, right? Because these guys are going to get a lot of positive, the credits, and they are in a position to sell these credits to other companies. If you don't understand this concept, you need to go and Google this, right? It's a key for branding, of course, the conservation aspect of it, wildlife projects. Then we also look at corporate social responsibilities play a significant role here. And we looked at the biomass opportunities. They've not explored this. So this is an area that they can look at, okay? And always, again, linked to strategic imperatives, mission, and vision. The sustainability activities may come as a project, right? So then you may have to look at the funding sources as well. And you have to look at, well, if I'm looking at funding this, and it's going to be quite an expensive project, it may be that you will not have sufficient funds to give dividends. Okay? Now, how do you manage that? Right? So that's a question that the examiner might want you to think as a senior manager. How would you advise the board on communicating this to your shareholders? Right? That's where you can talk about the long-term aspect of fund returns and what it's going to bring into the society as a whole. So you can market it in such a way, saying that it is not only a financial aspect that we need to consider, but also the non-financial aspect of what the shareholders are giving to the society as a whole. Right? That will kind of give a different context to the funding. Right? And sustainability is well and good, but how do you report and track is the important part. Okay? This is how do you report, track, communicate, because you need to communicate this to your stakeholders. Show them what is the return on investment. Return on investment may not be, like I said, financial. It may be a lot of non-financial things that you come up with. Okay? Any questions? So this is the final model, and it's called CSR Pyramid, or Corporate Social Responsibility Pyramid. So first you will look at economic responsibilities. That's, you're looking at be profitable, the foundation of which all the others rest. It's true, right? If you're not profitable, you cannot do anything. The first thing is you have a duty of care to your shareholders, and you need to be profitable. First thing. So once it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you remember, right? First need, you need to have food, right? After that, we can think of being very philosophical and philanthropic and everything else. Right? Without food, we will not think of anything else. The second one is a legal responsibility. Obey the law. Law is society's codification of right and wrong. Now, there you go. So you need to comply to the legal responsibilities, the ethical responsibilities. And then on top, you talk about philanthropy, right? Be a good corporate citizen. So I watched this movie on YouTube called The Corporation. Right? It's a 2-hour-long, I think, movie, but it's very insightful. It's a true documentary. So it talks about different companies, and you can see how companies, whether companies are good corporate citizens or not. Certain companies operate in the West in a certain manner, but when it comes to the African continent or Asia, they operate in a very different way. Well, so you can be the judge to see whether are they good corporate citizens or not. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentation. Any questions? Any questions, anyone?
Anju, will you be able to share any details on the crowdsourcing, different ways of crowdsourcing?
Yes. What I will do is I will send you a note on that. I'll send you an email, right, to all of you guys saying this is the kind of different types of crowdsourcing that can happen. Yes?
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Right. Any other questions? With all of you guys?
Next class is on Wednesday.
Yes. So, how is it going so far with your studies?
All right.
Sorry?
It's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Same time?
Yes. Okay then.
When you mock, when mock you
So I'm gonna be putting the mock most probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Yeah, thanks.